Thank you very much. Let's call the meeting for the Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners on August 28th, 2024 to order. Please first join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will start out this morning with citizen input. Robin Hawakawa, you're first and you have 3 minutes. Oh, really? Okay, public hearing, text amendment. Thank you. Missed that. Thank you, Nicole. Carl Shoemaker.
Good morning, I'm Carl. I live in Bend. La definizione di fascismo e matrimoni tra corporazione e Stato. Benito Mussolini. Grazie.
Do you want to translate that for us?
The definition.
Thank you.
The definition of fascism is the matrimony between corporations and the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Okay, let's see. It looks like Jeff Bergen. Yes, Jeff Bergen, you're next. I want to make sure you're not for the public hearing.
Morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
So I'm back again to kind of talk about Fort Thompson project, as I've been for 3 or 4 different times. So, I've looked at this probably 6 or 7 different ways trying to figure this thing out. And it just becomes more difficult for me each time. I've been told that it was going to be to move the campers that are out in the woods back over to this area, which I went out, G2'd and spoke with those people. They have no intent to come into town. I would think that from a commission standpoint or point of view, it would be for the county and to protect its people in the county and to put things up for the people in the county. So this project, I can only assume, would be for people passing through the county and coming in and out of the county, going north, going south, wherever they might be. But it really doesn't do anything for the people in the county. There's nothing that it would lend any kind of favor to the people in that area or this area at all. I don't see anybody from Bend going out there and camping. I don't see any of the people coming from out in the woods going there and camping. So it's just for passers through in the county, coming through the state. So I don't see where it really benefits the city, the state, the county, maybe a few dollars here and there that are coming through, but that's about it at the end of the day. What it does is it creates havoc in the area that the people that actually live out in that area, I being one of them, for egress and access, for people being basically in our backyards. And we moved out into those areas for certain reasons. And it was to get away from the population, to kind of get away from things and kind of live our lives out there in the peace and quiet, not to bother anybody. But this project would have an impact on the people that live in that area, without a doubt. And I strongly recommend or would request that you take a strong consideration on this project again, because I believe you're going to be looking at the September 6th and understand what it does to the people in that area and understand the impact it would have on us in that area. We already have Dirt World on the other side. I don't think we really need another campground that could turn into another dirt world on our, Commissioner, please, let me finish. That could possibly turn into another dirt world on our side. I'm going to make peace with you today. So, all right. So that's how I see this. And that's my 2 cents, but I wanted to get out, and speak to it again before you go to vote and before you go get more money to go back out and look at this project again. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in this morning. All right. Is there anyone else in the room that cared to testify? Stephen, do we have anyone online? Okay, please welcome Doreen Ty. Morning, Doreen. She's still on mute.
Sorry, there we go. Good morning.
Morning.
So you guys have, as the county and city as well, has the right to do condemnations, navigation easements, and buy properties, and do all the things that need to be done to protect people from aircraft activity. According to Leading Edge's own documents submitted to the FAA, which has been approved, where they said, hey, we're landing all over Central Oregon. Yeah, we're not supposed to be doing it, but hey, we can't because we don't have the right spotlights. So the FAA says, okay, well, go ahead and keep doing it. In those documents, it says that Leading Edge's, that 5G interference is a problem that interferes with tracking the entire length of our property. Get Our Home is exactly where Leading Edge, Bend Aircraft Mechanics, and J Aero, and others who buddy up with them do nearly every single final and base turn thousands of times a week, directly over our house. And when the wind shifts, they do nearly every single departure and upwind turn directly over our house. These flight schools come in 25 to 50 feet from the ground, then pull up, turning hundreds of feet directly over our home. The trackers on these flights almost always show them on a steady climb 1,000 feet up when they are here, and up to a half a mile away when they're always over our home. And I came to you guys last year because I was in the hospital 3 times because of this stupid shit. And this week, again, back to the hospital because it is highly toxic. Between the lead and the noise, it causes metabolic dysfunction. It makes you melt down inside. You guys need to get these damn flights off my house. You need to do something to protect the public from these people who really aren't making you a ton of money like your records show. And you need an audit on how much they really do benefit the community. And you need an audit on how many students end up without a job after they spend thousands of dollars. Like, you need to protect the citizens of this community. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Doreen. Stephen, are there any other raised hands? No? Okay, thank you. Then let's go to our consent agenda at this time.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Chang,
Yes.
Mr. DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So let us now go to item number 5, which is our proclamation. This proclamation is in regards to Cascades Futurity Event Days at the Deschutes County Fairgrounds. So if you would like to join us at the table and maybe tell the world a little bit about your amazing event. And just to quote someone who's on the Fair Association, she has said that the people that participate and ride those horses at your event are some of the nicest she deals with all year long.
They better be.
Yeah, well, they are.
I'm Julie Clark, and I started the Cascades Futurity and Aged event 8 years ago. And we started very small. We sold about 275 stalls the first year. This year, we are selling 576. We have everybody coming from all the way to Arkansas, to Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Nevada, California, Idaho. We have Canadians. It's a really, really premier event that the National Cutting Horse Association has deemed us to be a premier event. It's the only premier event in the Northwest. We appreciate the fact that the Deschutes County Fairgrounds is just absolutely amazing. We bring in about $7 million total over the last few years. We have a lot of private jets that come in. This year, we're going to pay out about $800,000 in prize money. Everybody stays at all downtown. They do all the Airbnbs. So Redmond is very, very influenced by this show. So we appreciate the proclamation. It's an honor. So we hope to still be here the next date. So
I hope so.
thank
I
you.
know it's amazing. I really think whenever I go, it's never looked, the indoor facility has never looked better. And I'm just hoping that we in Deschutes County can get more types of dirt for our arena, because I know everyone has a different wish. And, I keep talking to Jeff Hines, our
Yes.
director, Jeff. South Point, I think, has 7 or 8 different dirts for their horse equestrian events. And I know we need more than one.
We stage our dirt out there, actually. And so it's not ideal, but it's a lot of dirt to keep out there.
Yes.
But yes, it's all sorts of different disciplines have different footing requirements. So again, thank you, Knife River, Hooker Creek over the years
Great.
for all the dirt.
The dirt. Okay, we love the dirt. Oh, right. Oh, great. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you very
you and your granddaughter for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning.
Thanks,
Thank
Julie.
you.
So we do have a proclamation. Should we either vote on it or read it first?
We can read it.
Okay, Commissioner DeBonne, you want to start with the first 2 paragraphs?
Sure.
Commissioner Chang?
Before the Board of Commissioners of Deschutes County, Oregon, a proclamation, whereas the Cascades Futurity and Aged event has been a vital part of our community since the first show in 2018. And whereas each year the event fosters increased cultural awareness and appreciation for agriculture and showcases the ability of cutting horses.
Whereas the event further serves to increase awareness of the Deschutes County Fair and Expo Center and helps to attract new and repeat visitors to our area through tourism and recreation. And whereas the Cascades Futurity and Aged event advances the county's goal of economic opportunity by sustaining local businesses and realizing an estimated annual economic impact of more than $7 million.
Now therefore, the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners hereby proclaims September 5th through the 15th, 2024 to be Cascade Cutting Horse Futurity Days in Deschutes County, and welcomes all participants and many partners whose dedication to an essential part of the success of the annual futurity event. And it's dated this 28th day of August, 2024 by the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners. Yes, in honor of this, I actually jumped on my horse last night, bareback, because I had not been on her for a while. And I thought, you know what, I need to have, reading the proclamation, I thought I need to get on my horse. So thank you.
Right.
Oh, wow. I ride barrel horses. So yeah,
Oh, that's different.
I know.
So
Yeah, it's
with
fun.
that, I'll move the approval of the proclamation.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Well, congratulations and thank you. That facility is definitely has an indoor and outdoor arena. It's a great utilization of that full facility. And it's amazing. We have our fairgrounds. It goes from a large international music festival to this, Western feel event with the horses from around the country. So thank you for your efforts.
Ready for the vote? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And thank you so much. And that's amazing. You've doubled the number of stalls. I think double the number of states, and, have a wonderful 10 days.
Thank you. There
Yes.
you go.
Play the event.
Busy. Right. Okay, so now we do have item number 6. Thank you, Nicole.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, Senior Planner with Deschutes County Community Development. And I will hand it back to the chair to open us up with our hearing script.
Okay. This is the time and place set for a hearing regarding file numbers 247-24-00044-TA. The hearing relates to an applicant-initiated text amendment to allow mini storage as a conditional use in the multiple-use agricultural MUA 10 zone in certain areas along Highway 20. Staff will outline the hearings procedures which will be followed.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the chair mentioned, here we are for a hearing for Highway 20 mini storage text amendments. Just wanted to note that the hearing record, my slides will advance here, is located at this website here, so deschutes.org/highway 20 storage. I also wanted to note for the board and anyone who may be listening that there is a very similar text amendment that's also being proposed by a separate applicant team. So it's to allow mini storage as a conditional use in certain areas along Highway 97. So there is a separate record for that. It is a separate hearing process, and the board will hear that hearing in a few weeks. But just wanted to note just to reduce any confusion there. Next slide, please, Stephen. So following into our hearing procedures today, the Board of County Commissioners will take testimony and receive written evidence concerning, thank you, the proposed text amendment. The hearing is also being recorded. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. Staff will provide a brief report. The applicant, Eastside Bend, will present their testimony and evidence, aiming for a 30-minute or so limit. Agencies, if present, will provide their testimony with a 10-minute limit per agency, and then interested persons can provide their testimony aiming for a 3-minute limit. Following the testimony, the commission can request the applicant or staff answer any additional questions or provide any additional testimony. This is a hybrid hearing with both in-person and remote participation options. So for all participants, before starting your testimony, please provide your first and last name as well as your mailing address so we can add you to the notification list. And for our in-person participants, if you wish to testify, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet over at the side of the room here and submit it to the board's executive assistant. And today we have Angie filling in that role to the left of the dais. Chair Adair will then call up in-person participants for your testimony. And after your name is called, please come up to one of the tables here and remember to speak directly into the microphone. If you could advance that slide, Stephen. One more. Thank you. For our remote participants, if you wish to testify, you must be logged into Zoom or have called in using the Zoom dial-in option. When the chair asks if anyone would like to testify, you'll need to use the raise hand feature to notify the board. To do this, you need to press the raise hand button on your computer or smart device, or if you called in, dial *9. In addition to oral testimony, next slide, please, Stephen. Thank you. If anyone has written testimony to submit, please hand it to me. If you're participating remotely, you can submit your written testimony via email to me at nicole.mardell@deschutes.org. The chair and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. Questions to and from the chair may be entertained at any time at the chair's discretion. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another during that person's testimony, please direct your question to the chair after being recognized. The chair is free to decide whether or not to ask such questions of the person testifying. Prior to commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for conflict of interest. This challenge must be documented with specific reasons supported by facts. Should any commissioner be challenged, the member may disqualify himself or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide this issue.
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
I have none.
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
And I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
Thank you, commissioners. Hearing none, I'll proceed with my brief staff report. And Stephen, I'll have you advance.
Oh, we're not quite done with this.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner member of the hearings body based on conflicts of interest? Do we have any conflicts? Is there anyone with a raised hand online, Stephen? Seeing none, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
And I'll have you advance that slide. Thank you. So I'll keep my presentation relatively brief, since the applicant will provide quite a bit more detail. But this is an applicant-initiated text amendment. We don't often have these, so it is a little bit of a different process. The applicant has submitted a formal application and a fee to the Community Development Department, which we then review with the Planning Commission and now the board. The applicant is proposing changes to 1832 of the Deschutes County Code, our multiple use agricultural zone section, to allow mini storage as a conditional use in areas that are within 250 feet of an urban growth boundary adjacent to Highway 20,
500 feet, right?
2,500 feet.
Yes, yeah, not, yes.
Thank you. Of an urban growth boundary adjacent to Highway 20 and at least 10 acres in size and no greater than 35 acres in size. And there's an additional kind of element in their proposal to allow for multiple properties to be utilized to meet that minimum parcel size. In addition to 1832, I wanted to note that an additional section of our code comes into play as this is a proposed conditional use. So Stephen, if you could advance the slide. We do have additional conditional use criteria specifically for mini storage already in Deschutes County Code. So of course we have our standard conditional use criteria that relate to uses being harmonious with the surrounding environment, having some compatibility requirements, the ability to add specific conditions to mitigate a use as proposed. But in addition to that, we also have specific mini storage criteria that outline square footage maximums for individual storage spaces, prescribes what type of outside storage can be allowed. In this case, it's dead storage, so things like RVs, boats, recreational equipment. There's some screening, lighting, and setback requirements, parking and access requirements, and there's also an allowance for an on-site caretaker residence as well. Next slide, please. Based on our analysis, it looks like there's about 3 properties, thank you, that could be eligible based on the proposed language. But I wanted to note that there could be additional properties that could become eligible if an urban growth boundary were to expand, if property were to be rezoned, multiple parcels to be used to meet the minimum parcel size, or if property were to be reconfigured. Next slide, please. Oh, thanks, Steve.
There you have it.
Apologize for the technical difficulties.
Nicole, so this says within 2,500 feet of an urban growth boundary. You didn't mention sisters at all. And we're talking about Highway 20 and an urban growth boundary. So there's nothing currently that would be eligible under this amendment in the sisters area.
That is correct, Commissioner. So when we conducted the GIS analysis, we looked at what would meet those requirements in terms of that parcel size, direct access to Highway 20 and being zoned MUI 10 and that proximity to the UGB.
Mm-hmm.
So based on the City of Sisters today as it is, no properties are eligible, but wanted to note again, if property were rezoned or if an urban growth boundary were to expand, additional properties near City of Sisters could be eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. I wanted to provide a bit of background. So currently we do allow mini storage as a use in 6 of our zones in Deschutes County, primarily in our unincorporated communities, Terrebonne, Tumalo, and Sun River, and also in our rural commercial and rural industrial districts. In addition to the conditional use criteria that apply to all mini storage uses in several zones, some additional requirements were added to this use, things like square footage maximums, limitations related to traffic, screening, etc. Although in one case in the Tumalo Industrial Zone wanted to note that that is not regulated through a conditional use process, but that's through site plan review. So in that case, it's a little bit more flexible in that zone.
Nicole, do you have any sense, based on the currently available zones for mini storage, how many properties or how many acres of eligible property there are?
That's a great question, Commissioner. I don't have an exact number. If the board were to keep an open record period open, I could provide that detail into the record. I would say in terms of kind of anecdotally, there's only a few properties that are zoned Tumalo Industrial, only a few that are Tumalo Commercial Rural, and then Sun River Business Park There's quite a few properties, but it's primarily built out in that area. The rural, commercial, rural industrial zones, the board might be familiar based on past proposals. Those are kind of areas that were historically developed with some of those uses or recently rezoned. So near Deschutes Junction, for instance. So those are kind of limited in terms of the number of parcels there. We did research how many mini storage proposals have been approved and are currently in operation. So 6 are currently approved. And it's kind of a spread between those zones. There are 2 in the rural industrial zone, and then 1 in Sun River Business Park, 1 in Tumalo Industrial, and I believe 1 in Tumalo Commercial and Tumalo Commercial Rural, but I can verify that as well. And only 1 of those has a caretaker residence, which is also permitted through those conditional use requirements.
Thank you.
I wanted to note in terms of agency comments, we've received 5 comments into the record from 4 agencies. So we received 2 comments from ODOT regarding just kind of outlining the process for gaining access for site-specific development if this text amendment were to move forward. ODOT also requested some additional transportation findings, including a trip generation analysis, which was provided by the applicant during the open record period. We received a comment from Ben Fire, which was in response to a request that we sent out related to a question that we had from the Planning Commission. Planning commissioners wanted to ensure that our access requirements and those conditional use criteria were sufficient. And Ben Fire said, yes, there wasn't the need for any changes. They felt it was satisfactory. We also received a comment from Bend Parks and Recreation District related to a request to add an additional criteria to require developer or applicant to grant an access easement for Bend Parks and Rec facilities. So BPRD, in looking at the eligible properties, noticed that they do have a future trail planned in the vicinity. So they're hoping to be able to have access easement granted to them at the time of development. The applicant noted during the Planning Commission process, but they may speak to it again today, that they feel this request is more fitting for review at the time of site-specific development. So they said they'd be, interested in working with BPRD, but perhaps not interested in adding additional criteria at this point. We also received a comment following the Planning Commission process from our county transportation planner, who essentially outlined some of the requirements that would come into play for transportation review if this were to move forward to site-specific development. Wanted to also note in terms of public comment, we've received 3 public comments to date. 1 was received after the Planning Commission process. Generally, there was concern about compatibility with the intent of the multiple use agricultural zone, concerns regarding the need and intended users, whether or not due to the proximity of the urban growth boundary in the siting criteria, if this would be utilized more for city residents. Concern about this potentially being an urban use on rural land and some potential conflict with Goal 12, or apologies, Goal 2 and Goal 14. So kind of a request for the applicant to seek an exception to Goal 14, or instead of a text amendment, potentially rezone a property that they were interested in to allow this type of use through something like a rural industrial district. There's also concern about the sufficiency of the EC analysis, as this does impact Goal 5, scenic corridor, Highway 20 is in our landscape management combining zone. So concerns about the economic, social, energy, and environment analysis that was provided. Wanted to note the Planning Commission process. The Planning Commission voted ultimately 3-2 to recommend denial of the proposal. They asked me to provide a bit of context on that decision. So the key issues for those who were in opposition or voted to recommend denial is those parties felt that there was not a compelling reason for storage, as rural residences typically have larger lot sizes, so they have additional room to store things like RVs or boats or personal belongings. So they felt that this would likely be used by city residents. And the purpose of the zone, the multiple use agricultural zone, is intended to promote residential uses and preservation of open space. So they felt like this would impact that negatively. It could be seen as sprawl or kind of an urban use on rural lands, and some concerns about that impact to the scenic corridor along Highway 20. Those who are in support of recommending approval of the amendments, those two parties wanted to express that they felt there were very limited impacts from this proposal. There's limited traffic generation, kind of trips from this proposal. Through the conditional use permit process, there's quite a few requirements for screening and, through the public process, since it does require notice, there could be additional conditions to be added, which could mitigate some of the impacts from the use. They felt that this was less intensive than other conditional uses currently allowed in the zone. Things like dog kennels and churches were some of the examples that were discussed. And they felt that the use is allowed in other zones, so it is compliant with Goal 14, even though there isn't, very clear case law on this issue, and that it fills in a gap that's needed, filling in kind of a transition area between the urban and rural environment and providing an opportunity for storage where it's not really allowed in many other zones. Wanted to also note, they asked me to note the outcome of the other proposal. So for the Highway 97 process, the Planning Commission recently deliberated and there was a very different recommendation. It was 4-0 to recommend approval. The Planning Commission wanted to note that the makeup of members in attendance at each deliberation was quite different. So the 3 folks who voted to recommend denial, unfortunately, were not in attendance during deliberation of the Highway 97 process, and one who was in support of Highway 97 wasn't in attendance at deliberation on this Highway 20 proposal.
Well, thanks for taking a moment to explain that. And, shows that there's just deep review and true opinion sharing at these, and, opposition and support statements are coming our way. So I really appreciate that process.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to provide that.
Nicole, besides the composition of the planning commission on the days when these 2 different proposals were being reviewed, is there anything substantively different between this application and the Highway 97 application? Is it the same 2,500 feet of an urban growth boundary, et cetera?
Yes, that's a great question, Commissioner. I would say one of the key differences is that in the Highway 97 example, there are quite a few additional properties that are eligible just due to Highway 97 and kind of, again, those siting criteria. When we conducted the analysis, I believe there was certainly more than 25 properties eligible. I can provide kind of more detail on that after reviewing the record a bit more. But the Planning Commission did note that difference. There was a minor difference in their proposal for Highway 97. They had a maximum parcel size of 30 acres, but otherwise those siting criteria were very much the same. So with that, unless the board has any other questions, following today's hearing, you have several options to move forward. You could choose to continue the hearing to a date and time certain.
Nicole, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Are 3 of the current public storage facilities, are 3 of them in Tumalo then?
We have,
You said 2 were in,
yes, thank you for the clarification. So now I'm looking at my notes. We have 1 in Terrebonne Commercial,
okay, Terrebonne. Okay.
1 in the
I'm-
Sun River Business Park, 1 in the Tumalo Industrial District, 1 in the Rural Service Center District, which that use is no longer allowed. But it's a kind of a remnant approval, and then 2 in the Rural Industrial District. So thank you for. providing the opportunity.
where is that rural industrial district then?
Those 2 rural industrial districts, those are off of, I can pull up the approvals, but it's in the Deschutes Junction
Okay,
area.
Deschutes Junction. Okay, all right. I was just
Are
trying.
those the recent rezones?
I don't believe they were the recent rezones. The approvals that we have, I can pull this up and provide a bit more detail on it once I connect to our share drive. But I believe the latest approval was in 2020. So it wasn't the most recent proposal that was from LBNW. It was, I believe, a couple years before that. And I think the one before that was maybe 27 or 2018, but I'll have to connect to our resources and I can follow up on that.
Thank you.
So going back to our next steps, so several options to move forward. You could continue the hearing to a date and time certain, close the hearing and leave the written record open to a date certain, close the hearing and set a date for deliberations, or close the hearing and commence deliberations. And with that, I will turn it over to the board if you had any other questions, and otherwise we can move on to the applicant's presentation.
Any other questions? Okay, so then let's go ahead. The applicant is given 30 minutes at this time, and then if they need a rebuttal period, 10 minutes at the end.
It's at due to the legislative process, it's at the discretion of the chair.
Okay.
So yeah, 30 minutes would be great to start. And then if you wanted to grant rebuttal, I think 10 minutes is sufficient.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So applicant, you can approach.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm Gary Miller. I own the property in East Side Bend. There was discussion when we first made the application about possibly going with an outright use. I chose against that. I chose a conditional use because I believed it's important not only to receive preliminary approval, but to come back and justify the quality of the project, especially when we're in a view shed corridor. If any of you are familiar with my property out there, there were a lot of nice trees on one side of the road till ODOT came in and put a roundabout in, and then I lost all those trees. So I believe that if we do receive approval, when I come back with a conditional application for a project, I can landscape that in a fashion, not only mitigate the project, but also restore some of what we lost when we did the roundabout. The concern about projects qualifying for this use, 2 of the 3 properties I own. So I'm not going to do both. I have a 15-acre parcel on the north side I think is ideal for this use, and that's the parcel that we lost all the trees on. And I believe that we have good ingress and egress because of the roundabout. We can ingress on main ingress and egress off of Hanby, and the secondary can be off Highway 20, which has already been approved by ODOT and is in our conditions when we put the roundabout in. So we do have good ingress and egress to the property. I believe it's also in a location where because of the roundabout, we have minimum impact on traffic. You don't have to cross over streets that are impacted on Highway 20. You can use a roundabout and ingress basically to the north of the roundabout. So we believe we can not only justify what we want to do now, but we can actually, by using the conditional use process, justify doing the project by showing you that we can landscape, we can buffer it, we can mitigate the impacts on any surrounding properties, which 2 of them I own, one of my own, and I think a competitor of mine owns the other, another builder in town. And but we think it's a good project, especially for the location. We believe there's a minimum impact on the county, and it's a tremendous benefit because it does provide that type of use in that location. Now I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. So good morning, commissioners. My name is Matt Robinson, and I'm a land use planner with Dow. And we've been working with Gary, who's the applicant on this text amendment that's before you this morning. So we have a pretty quick presentation. It has some overlap with Nicole's presentation, but some other points we'd like to make. And then after I get through that, Michael McGeehan, who is the applicant's legal counsel, he's going to speak briefly as well. And then we're happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. There you go. So what we're proposing is a text amendment to the Deschutes County Code, and it would allow mini storage uses, which includes watercraft and RV storage as a conditional use in limited instances within the MUA zone. So in order for a property to be eligible for mini storage, it would have to be within 2,500 feet of an urban growth boundary. It would have to have adjacency to US Highway 20. And the parcel or group of parcels would have to be a minimum of 10 acres, and it would not be allowed to exceed 35 acres. So we're not actually proposing any mini storage development with this application. And if the application is approved, the application or the future mini storage proposal would still have to go through any required land use reviews with Deschutes County. And so at a minimum, that would include site plan review as well as the conditional use permit process. So Nicole covered this as well, but just to reiterate, the proposal affects a limited number of properties within the county. So all of the eligible properties are east of Bend along Highway 20. There's additional, so on this map, all the green is the MUA zone properties in the county. There is additional MUA zone land north of the Bend UGB along Highway 20, but none of that is currently close to within 2,500 feet of the urban growth boundary. The Sisters UGB is also shown kind of on the left side of that map, and there's no MUA zone land anywhere near that. So unless Sisters had some pretty explosive growth, I don't think that's going to.
Could you speak just a teeny bit closer to the?
Yeah, and unless Sisters grows considerably, there's not really a chance that there would be any eligible properties near the Sisters UGB. Okay, next slide here. So as mentioned, if the text amendment is approved, any future mini storage uses would be required to go through the CUP process. And importantly, the CUP process offers a considerable opportunity for public input during the review. And it also gives the review authority considerable discretion to alter a proposal in response to public comments and in a manner that ensures compatibility with surrounding land uses and development patterns. So the proposed text that we are proposing, it was intentionally flexible. So, given that any future proposal would have to go through that CUP process, where specific use can be reviewed for compatibility with its surrounding area at the time of the application. So listed on the screen here are the three main sections of code that a mini storage proposal would need to comply with through the CUP process. And these sections give the review authority quite a bit of discretion on a proposal's design and layout, its operational characteristics, the adequacy of transportation facilities that will serve the use, and whether or not any offsite improvements would be necessary to accommodate it. It takes into consideration the physical characteristics of a site, and whether any natural resources within that site would need to be protected or considered as a part of the mini storage facility's design. It considers what surrounding land uses look like and whether any impacts from a mini storage facility would need to be mitigated. So importantly, it gives the county the ability to require things such as larger setbacks, a more limited development area, increased landscaping, screening from adjacent properties, or they can impose limitations on the use, such as more limited hours of operations, and all of that can be done through conditions of approval. So all in all, the CUP process gives the county sufficient kind of control over the land use review of the proposal, and it helps to ensure that mini storage facilities would be compatible with surrounding land uses, development, and homes. So why mini storage in the MUA zone? Well, I think we believe that MUA zone is appropriate for mini storage, given that MUA zone is considered exception land, and it can allow a variety of uses that are intended to support rural residents and other rural uses. And during the Planning Commission hearing, a majority of the commissioners actually agreed that this use was consistent with the purpose of the MUA zone in both this application and the Highway 97 application. So second, the location along Highway 20 can provide mini storage facilities with convenient access to rural residential areas to the east of Bend, without these residents needing to go directly into Bend for mini storage. Mini storage is also low impact. It has low vehicular trip rates. It's not land consumptive. It has almost no demand on sewer or water utilities, and it has minimal impact on adjacent properties just because there's not a lot of people coming and going on the site once it's constructed. Mini storage facilities are also of a similar size and scale to uses that are already allowed in the MUA zone through the conditional use process. And that includes things such as schools and government buildings, veterinarian clinics, churches, or other religious institutions. And all of those uses have higher vehicular trip rates to and from the site. They have more activity more consistently on a site. And so, for those reasons, we don't think that a mini storage facility is really outside the bounds of what's already allowed in that zone. So just a few concluding points here to reiterate. The proposed text amendment applies to a pretty limited geography within the county, and it has a smaller impact on general land use within the county as compared to a rezone. So, if we were proposing to rezone a few properties to rural industrial, the amount of uses that would be allowed through a rezone it's a greater number of uses that have a greater number of impacts than amending the MUA zone text to just allow mini storage. So subjecting future mini storage uses to the CUP process also ensures that the county has broad discretion to alter a proposal to ensure it can be compatible with adjacent land uses. And that also that it can actually be physically accommodated on the property and that infrastructure is adjacent or is adequate to serve the use. Like I said, we believe the MUA zone is appropriate for the use, given it is considered exception land, and the zone has a purpose of supporting rural uses and rural residents, which the Planning Commission found as well. So finally, mini storage is also low impact. Like I mentioned, it has minimal infrastructure requirements, and it's a use that provides kind of an optimal holding use for lands that aren't really suitable for agricultural purposes, but are likely to urbanize over the next 20, 30, 40 years. With the Bend UGB, it's likely to continue to go east, and this would be a use that could be easily redeveloped whenever that does occur for urban uses, given its pretty low impact and doesn't require much to become operational. So with that, Michael, if you'd like to speak, and then we're happy to answer any questions as well after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
My name is Michael McGeehan, and I am the attorney for the applicant Eastside Bend and Mr. Miller here. I was just going to address several of the legal issues that have come up to date so far in the record, which you might have seen, and just touch on some of the highlights of the application. I think Mr. Robinson covered it pretty well as far as the reasons why we think that this is an appropriate text amendment. First of all, the fact that it is just a new conditional use that we are proposing. Second, that the county code already has a mini storage set of criteria for conditional uses and has allowed mini storage as a conditional use in other rural land like the rural industrial, rural commercial, and the unincorporated zones that Ms. Mardell mentioned. So, for those reasons, we think that this is a good legislative fit to add this, especially with the very limited and kind of finely tailored sort of amendment that we've tried to propose here, so that the impacts are always going to be limited to areas that are directly adjacent to the existing City of Bend, UGB, wherever that happens to be, and Highway 20. So that's just going to be a factor that's going to always inherently limit the effect of this particular amendment. And so we think that that's an important reason why this is a good fit with the MUA zone. I wanted to address some of the findings that the Planning Commission made and some of their reasoning and their decision making. First of all, I wanted to point out that actually 4 out of the 5 commissioners in our hearing found that there was compatibility with this particular use and the MUA zone. So just looking generally at the purpose statement of the MUA zone, which Mr. Robinson went through just a moment ago, pointing out the fact that it is intended to be a transitional kind of zone, that it's exception area. A majority of the Planning Commission found that this was actually a compatible use. And you see that they, in the course of their reasoning on that, they analogize this to a couple of other uses that are already allowed as conditional uses. Dog kennels, I think, is a very good example of something that is, similar in character to the mini storage example, but actually, which would be a more impactful kind of use as far as traffic. Public facilities, utility facilities, churches, all of these kinds of things are existing currently as conditional uses in the MUA 10 zone. And we think that the mini storage example here is another compatible use along those same lines. So that I think was important, an important takeaway from the Planning Commission meeting on this. One of the issues that did come up in the Planning Commission deliberations, which I wanted to address, was some procedural confusion, or at least we think that it's confusion about the nature of this application and whether it is truly a legislative kind of request that we're presenting to the commissioners, or if it is somehow a more site-specific, quasi judicial sort of application. And that was in response to one of the opposition statements that the commissioners received. It got a little bit of traction, but ultimately we think that that's was a mistake and just reflected some confusion in the process. And it actually was addressed in our post-hearing submittal. If any of the commissioners are interested in looking at that, in particular, we cited to a case that was a LUBA opinion called Carver versus Deschutes County. And in that decision from 2009, LUBA rejected a similar argument that was actually about another zoning ordinance amendment that was being proposed there. And the objection was that this should be considered a quasi judicial application with all of those different procedures that you would have for a quasi judicial application, such as a map change or, a site plan application, something site specific. And LUBA said, no, this is truly legislative in character. It has general application to the entire county because it is just an amendment of the code. And even though practically speaking, it might currently impact a handful of specific properties, that does not convert it from a legislative process to a judicial process that would require additional procedures like direct notice to neighbors and things like that. So we feel that staff in this case and the applicant followed through with the correct procedures for a legislative amendment, which is what this undeniably is, and that those quasi judicial procedures just flat out are not applicable to this kind of application. So that's I just wanted to distinguish that particular question, which had been raised to the Planning Commission. Other than that, there was supportive voices of support for this application in the Planning Commission. And of course, as Ms. Mardell pointed out, in the other application that is very similar but related to Highway 97, there was quite a more full-throated sort of support for that application, which just the way it worked out, practically speaking, involved a different quorum of the Planning Commission at that time. So the only other issue that I really wanted to address in this particular case was the Goal 14 question that's going to be important for the county's review, for your review and your consideration, and for the objections that we've received. And Goal 14 for open space rural type protections, there's a leading case that we've discussed and cited in our application materials that really is sets a balancing test for how to evaluate a Goal 14 compatibility question. And in that case, Schaefer v. Jackson, it's basically a 4-point test. And one of the questions is it looks at the number of employees and the impacts. And in this particular case, the mini storage use is very low impact, very low employees, not a large number of employees trafficking back and forth. Another relevant factor under that test is whether it requires city services. And in our particular case, mini storage does not require the extension of any city services in this particular case. So that's another factor that would support our application. And somewhat similarly, there's a question about whether it's resource dependent in any particular way, this proposed use. And even though it's maybe not commonly viewed traditionally as a resource, the applicable resource in this case would be the Highway 20 resource. And we think that it is actually somewhat site dependent on being close to a highway like Highway 20. So we also think that factor supports the application because it is somewhat dependent on a resource in this particular case. And then, finally, kind of the crux of the matter is whether this is somehow a inherently urban versus inherently rural use. And that's something that is, there's not really a black letter test for that or a clear line, but we would, in our view, this is something that is not inherently urban. As Ms. Mardell pointed out, it is actually allowed in a number of different current rural zones, the RI, the RC, and then the unincorporated zones. And in fact, the approved applications demonstrate how it is geographically spread out through the county. And so we think that that reinforces the idea that it is not an inherently urban use any more than a number of the allowed uses that you currently see in the MUA 10 zone would be with the dog kennels and the religious facility, the churches and the public facilities. And so ultimately, as the Planning Commission found in the 97 case and also found in our case, that this is in fact compatible with the MUA 10 policy. And for that reason, we would request that the commission approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGain. All right, so you, you're done with your presentation then? At this
Yes.
moment? Okay. All right, great. So let's see who we have in the room then that cares to testify.
Is now the time to ask the applicant questions or?
Sure, we can. Would be appropriate.
I appreciate, so I'd like to return to this idea of pursuing a site-specific rural industrial or rural commercial rezone versus pursuing this legislative amendment. And I hear the argument that you think that rezoning to rural industrial would allow a wider range of uses that people might be concerned about, but it also keeps it keeps what you're seeking to a very site specific kind of effort. I'm very concerned about what this and this other Highway 97 proposal mean to the MUA zone. And I don't agree with you that these are more intensive uses than a kennel or a church. A data center doesn't generate a whole lot of trips. There's not a whole lot of traffic, but a data center completely transforms the landscape. And, the amount of impervious surface, the amount of built infrastructure in a mini storage changes the landscape. So that the idea that you could do this on MUA land within a half mile of the urban growth boundary, when the urban growth boundaries change, constantly evolving, and zoning changes, is constantly evolving. I mean, I've sat on this board of commissioners when they're through multiple votes to rezone land from EFU to MUA 10. So, if those dimensions of this policy basically are applying to a constantly changing geography, you are really significantly changing what multiple use agriculture zoning means across more than just the 3 sites that you're talking about. So that's my concern about this. So maybe there wasn't a question in there, but I kind of I basically would put forward the argument to pursue a site-specific rezone or a site-specific rezone versus pursuing this policy that has significant implications to many other properties.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do appreciate that comment, and it is a choice that where this, if this particular application, if we had decided to present it as a map amendment instead in a rezone to RC or RI, it of course would have subjected, if it had been approved, would have been for the same kind of use in mind, but ultimately it would open these properties up to a host of different uses, which we don't really think fit with this particular area. And so, that hence we have the purpose of just limiting it to the 2,500 feet that's directly adjacent to the UGB. I will note again that there are the built-in guardrails and screening criteria, setback criteria, other elements, criteria that are designed to harmonize this that are already present for any kind of mini storage conditional use application that's already built into the conditional use permit code. So that's going to be present to ensure that this does not become some sort of, dystopian kind of project with hard surfaces, a data center or anything like that. A data center, of course, is something that would require a fairly massive extension of services.
Yeah, no, when I said data center, it wasn't to say that, you're seeking a data center. I'm just saying, I'm just comparing some of the things that you mentioned, your explanation of why you thought a dog kennel was a more intensive use was about trips. And a data center just doesn't have that many trips, but it is a transformation of the land. And so, I mean, I appreciate the 2,500 feet of a UGB along a highway, but this changes the nature of multiple use agriculture land and land use in a constantly shifting geography, because zoning and the urban growth boundaries are constantly evolving.
Might I respond?
Yeah.
I appreciate your concerns. When you said the data center, I have the Deschutes County Library being built on my property right now, and you won't believe the amount of power required for that library. I mean, I looked at how many houses I could build for the power this one library consumes, and the data center is very similar. It's very impactful. So I respect that. When we discuss the concept of how we wanted to make the approach to outright use versus conditional, I chose conditional because I respect your concerns. There's nothing that requires you to prove anything. Once we present a project because you think doesn't meet your criteria and you deny the conditional use of it, that gives you a second bite of the apple. My concept might sound one way, but the reality presented to you might be another. And there's nothing binding you, any of you, to approve for the second, which is the actual presentation, whether the demographics change, the boundaries change in the future, whatever. It does not lock you into anything. If I'd have said an outright use within 2,500 feet of UGB, you're locked in. I don't think that's appropriate. I respect your position in government. I look back at my past, I had a little bit of that. And, you should not approve something that you feel might change in the future or lock you into approving something in the future that you might not want today. So, but my concept, when I said, no, I want a conditional where somebody else, I won't say who, wanted it outright originally, I thought was inappropriate, because I think that you, as a legislative body representing the citizenry, should make sure that they're protected in the future. By me wanting to use the conditional use permit process, I believe I've given you that. Now, we might all look at that differently, but you as elected officials are not bound to approve anything under a CUP process that does not meet your specific demands and requirements. They can say, well, we did all these things, but it still does not maybe, pass the bar of what you think is appropriate at that point in time, and you're not bound to vote for it. And so that's why I picked this process, not locking you in. And I do understand the CUP process, and I understand your authority over that. And so my thought when I came up with the CUP process for my team was to give you that second bite of the apple. If I can't justify that I can make the scenery out there better than it is today, I understand your concern. If I cannot provide adequate setbacks and screening and other mitigation to meet your concerns in the future, you're not bound to approve it. So I believe I can do that. I was rather shocked when ODOT started removing trees from my property before they owned it. There were nice trees, because I can't do that on my other projects, but I'm not the state of, Oregon, or I don't have that authority. But I believe I can present a project to you after, if you approve this. If you don't, I don't present anything. But I believe I can justify your concerns and mitigate your concerns through the application process at that point in time. And if I can't, I support you turning me down. If I can't do what I think I can do, I don't expect you to be bound to approve it at that point in time.
Yeah, no, and I have no doubt that you could put forward a reasonable proposal for that specific site. My concerns that I'm articulating are about the nature of MUA across broad parts of Deschutes County.
Sir, I respect your concerns.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, Madam Chair?
No, I don't believe so. No questions at this moment. Thank you. All right. So we are looking to see, are there any agencies here today that we have? ODOT, Nicole? No? Is any agencies online, Stephen? None? Okay, all right. So someone else that would care to testify then? We have Robin Hawakawa.
I have some written comments to submit as well. So
Thank you so much.
and we submitted similar comments to these before the planning commission, but we've supplemented them.
Okay, from your original. Okay, I've got that. Thanks.
Similar, but appreciate your attention to them because they are different.
So is this taking your letter from June 13th and then updating it?
Yeah, there's substantive differences, but
Okay, all
some
right.
similarities as well.
Thank you.
So good morning, Chair Adair, County Commissioners. My name is Robin Hayakawa. I'm testifying today on behalf of Central Oregon Land Watch. Our address is 2843 Northwest Lolo Drive, Suite 200, Bend, Oregon, 97703. This is my first time appearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners, so I'd just like to thank you for hearing public comment today, and more generally to thank you for the work you do for Deschutes County. I'm appearing today with several points of concern about the proposed text amendment. It's difficult to encapsulate them all in 3 minutes, but I'll try and run through them. Some of them have just been addressed by the applicant and some of the questions from Commissioner Chang. The first concern is a general non-compliance with the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan and the purpose statement of the MUA 10 zone. The comprehensive plan and MUA 10 provide for the preservation of rural land and the rural character in the rural areas of the county. These criteria can be somewhat subjective, but Landwatch feels strongly that this application to allow mini storage conflicts with both the spirit and the substance of these laws in substantial ways. Our second concerns are more procedural. We've had a brief discussion about this just now, but our feeling is that this application is asking the board to make a quasi-judicial land use decision. As currently constructed, it only affects 3 properties, but we've just heard testimony that essentially this is aimed at one single property, a 15-acre property. The Planning Commission recognized this and recommended denial partially on this basis, and I suspect that the board likely sees similarities in this application with other applications that were processed quasi-judicially for rezones. Finally, I think much of what this comes down to has to do with Goal 14, and that this application appears to be asking to allow an urban use on rural land. We just heard testimony from the applicant that a lot of this can be sorted out in the conditional use process, but the goals aren't going to apply at a conditional use process. So it's important that this application here complies with Goal 14. It's very difficult to address legal arguments in 3 minutes, but Mr. McGean was speaking to the Schaffer case. Landwatch feels strongly that an analysis of the Schaffer factors would find that this is in fact an urban use and not a rural use, and it's inappropriate in the rural residential zones of the county. I also think it's really important. There's a Friends of Yamhill County case that deals with mini storage directly outside the UGB. This one was in Yamhill County outside of McMinnville. And LUBA had occasion to analyze a pretty similar fact pattern and determined that a mini storage facility directly outside of a UGB that is thought to serve predominantly urban users is non-compliant with Goal 14. So for these reasons, Landwatch recommends the denial of the proposed text amendment, and thank you for hearing public testimony today.
Okay, yes, and I do know the Yamhill case was 2005 and the Schaefer case was from 1989. So I'll have to see what you wrote in here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that's going to testify today? Stephen, any raised hands online? One? Okay. Doreen? Doreen, welcome.
Hello again, Commissioners. Doreen Tai. Again, I'm expressing concern that zoning growth boundaries, UGB expansions, and community development should not be dictated by developers and applicants. Rather, the size, shape, and expansion of UGB and industrial zones are and should be community driven. Please consider that by accepting this applicant-driven spot zoning, it appears to be precedent setting. If you'll recall, you approved hundreds of acres to be converted from EFU on the east side of Bend to rural residential MU and MUA. Even commissioners expressed concern that once converted, they did not want to see this happen. This project does not represent the urban feel appeal in essence of this area. Once you approve this, we then be approving the same on the hundreds of acres east of Bend. Most of these large tract applications for initial conversions from EFU, rural residential, forest, and reserve have been requested and approved based on housing needs. I ask you to please reconsider and deny this application so you aren't setting a precedence to do this across the rest of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen, for testifying. Stephen, are there any other raised hands? Okay. So, Nicole, do we give the applicant time to come back up or after you speak?
I'm here in case the board had any additional questions for staff. But yes, now would be the time if you wanted to ask any additional questions of the applicant or give them additional time for rebuttal. You could grant that.
I have a question for CDD. In the next couple of weeks, the city of Bend has announced its intention to pursue an urban area reserve. And we will be discussing that with them in a joint meeting in, I believe, next week. Can you talk a little bit about how an urban area reserve designation and land use in this area interact? I guess one of the things I'm specifically wondering is whether we should be pausing consideration of these legislative amendments until it's clear what the city wants to do in that urban area reserve designation, because we could be essentially enabling land uses right now that conflict with the intent of orderly urban development. As the applicant said, this is very close to the urban growth boundary and eventually will become urbanized.
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner.
See Peter and
Ready.
Peter wants to pile up too.
So I can start and then I look to Peter to fill in any gaps with his many years of knowledge at Deschutes County. I would say, we did send notice of this proposal to City of Bend staff, including their growth management staff. We were, in coordination with them to make sure they received that notice, as we were aware that they were doing some potential urban reserve planning. As I understand it, they're planning to kick that off as part of their urban growth boundary expansion process, but may not actually develop those urban reserves until 2025. So we didn't receive any comments from City of Bend staff at this time about this proposal. I wanted to note, again, trying to ensure that the records are kept separate, but I think this information is important to include as part of this process. We did receive a comment from the City of Redmond that I can add into the record for this proposal for the Highway 97 proposal, requesting that there be a additional criteria added to the siting criteria to exclude Redmond Urban Reserve area properties, because they did feel like, they wanted to ensure those lands could be urbanizable in the future. So that was a comment that we received from a city that already had those urban reserve lands. I would say, and if Peter wanted to add, in terms of, this process, because this is applicant initiated, it is a legislative process. There isn't necessarily a review timeline, but we do try to process these in a reasonable timeline, just to ensure that the applicant gets kind of a reasonable decision on their proposal as drafted. But Peter,
Yeah.
if you had any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And Madam Chair, members of the board, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. Commissioner Chang, there's a lot to unpack in your question, so I'll follow up accordingly. I did attend a public I guess it was a public meeting with the City of Bend staff yesterday. I may have the bill number off, but I think it's Senate Bill 1537 that pertains to a one-time expedited urban growth boundary amendment based on the city of Bend currently meets the there's some socioeconomic factors that make a municipality eligible to take advantage of this legislation. And I think it has to do with the tenured split between renter to home ownership and displacement ultimately. So the City of Bend has a very aggressive schedule. They want to receive applications from expressions of interest from property owners on this one-time urban growth boundary. It would be approximately 100 acres pertaining to residential development. The city ultimately is not going to be, to the extent they get interest and they select a preferred concept, there's a lot of work that a property owner and their team have to do to develop an urban growth boundary, develop a proposal with multimodal elements, housing elements, complete community, complete neighborhoods. That's not going to happen until 2025, fall 2025 at the earliest. What's telegraphing to me from the City of Bend as it pertains to their next urban growth boundary amendment and the possibility of an urban reserve program is that I think after this one-time urban growth boundary amendment opportunity is finished, I think the City of Bend is going to initiate an urban growth boundary amendment, which will take probably 2 to 3 years. And then afterwards, they'll take the justification and the basis for that urban growth boundary amendment, which is a 20-year land need, and extrapolate that out for an urban reserve. So this is a long-winded way of saying what's being communicated to me imperfectly is urban reserves, while they're a very important tool for the City of Bend and other communities, it's not something that the city, I think, is going to be initiating anytime soon. As it pertains to this application, there's a goalpost rule, to the extent that the board finds that this amendment is noteworthy, to the extent that urban reserves were on the horizon, which I don't think they are, but this application has been initiated and would not find itself in conflict with, say, an urban reserve proposal. I guess the last thing is I think it's important to recognize is urban reserves are a holding zone. They're a combining zone. The strength and influence that an urban reserve does is it designates land for as first priority for inclusion into an urban growth boundary amendment. It protects future transportation corridors. It precludes upzoning. And so at this point, how this application is being presented, in my opinion, is not running in conflict with an urban reserve opportunity that is possible, and probably by the end of this decade.
So you're saying in 6 more years?
Well, I think that's a good question. Next week, the Board of County Commissioners is holding a joint meeting with City Council here in this chambers on Thursday. It's a question for, I think, City of Bend staff. As I've articulated, I think they really are interested in seeing if this one-time urban growth boundary amendment opportunity is acted upon by developers. Then I think it's on to the urban growth boundary amendment process, and then following that is an urban reserve. I think conservatively it might be 6 years. I think the City of Bend is communicating that they would like to shorten that schedule, but I think it gives you a potential timeline.
Yeah, that's helpful to understand the timelines for those processes. I guess, I appreciate that we gave the City of Bend the opportunity to provide comment within the timeframes of the process so far. We have seen, time after time with rezone applications and other things that the City of Bend is not submitting comments. So I think they're kind of overwhelmed and sometimes need a little bit of prodding and pointing. In this case, if we provided the city the opportunity to say, are you sure you don't want to comment about this? And they said, yeah, no, we have studied this and we don't want to comment on it. That would be fine. But based on what I've just heard, I would lean towards wanting to reopen the record for a short period of time, to allow the city the opportunity to weigh in on the relationship between, this legislative text amendment and their future vision for expansion in the near vicinity of the city on the east side.
And Madam Chair and Commissioners, wanted to note the record is still open. So that will be one of your decision points today. If you want to close the oral portion, keep the written record open, or continue the full hearing. So that will be, an item that you'll discuss potentially after the applicant's rebuttal or any additional questions you have for the applicant.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicole. I was reading that. That was your first option.
All right. Any other questions for staff?
No, thank you.
Yep.
So would you like to use your time then for rebuttal?
Thank you, Commissioners. I wanted to just be available if you had any follow-up questions after the other testimony. I was going to point out there was one case that was cited, the Friends of Yamhill County case, and that's something that we addressed in our post-hearing submission to the Planning Commission. For a number of reasons, that particular opinion from LUBA we think is somewhat narrow. And it does not stand for the idea that mini storage is somehow not a rural use, or that it is inherently urban use. So it's a case that's really determined a lot by the particular geographical factors in that case, with that land lying directly in between the city of Lafayette and city of McMinnville. So it's, in our view, it's not really applicable. As far as the compatibility with the comprehensive plan and the comments that Central Oregon Land Watch made as to that, we think that it's demonstrated by the compatibility with the purpose statement for the MUA 10 zone, which has been acknowledged. And that purpose statement, of course, stating explicitly that the purpose of MUA 10 is to allow some development of the property so long as it is overall consistent with the rural character. And so, you know, for that reason, and because the purpose actually does anticipate that it's going to be a transitional zone, we think that this is spot on really with the amendment that we're proposing. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have. We're not asking for any additional time to leave the record open, but of course, we'll defer to the commissioners on how you want to treat that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGann.
I want to, in clarification to the property the city of Bend wants to bring in, they want to bring in 100 net acres, excluding right of ways and roads, et cetera. So they're looking for a big piece of property that I don't have in this area. So
Yeah, that's their immediate one-time urban growth boundary expansion. I was speaking to the urban area reserve
Good.
that they're hoping to establish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Nicole. Commissioner DeBonne.
Well, generally with what I've heard, I would lean towards, possibly closing the record and working on deliberations. Lots of great information discussed today. And I do have my conclusions and thoughts on this.
Okay. Commissioner Chang.
Well, as stated, I'd like to keep the written record at least open for a little longer, and just double check with the city of Bend that they have no comments or concerns that they want to share about this.
Okay. I would agree with that, to hold the written record open so that we would have time to read the letter that we were given at today's meeting. I think that's appropriate. And, checking with the city of Bend, we keep asking them and we keep doing things on the east side of town in order to allow for more developed houses. And, it would be nice to hear from them. So I don't know, do we need a vote then on that?
Certainly, I think it would be helpful to establish what length of open record period you would like to have. Often, I think the board will do about a week. We could do 2 weeks. As part of that open record process, starting today, I can reach out to City of Bend staff and note that the board would like to potentially hear a response from the city, kind of either way, if there are any comments or not. But would 1 week sound sufficient to the
Okay,
board?
so Monday is a holiday, remember that. So 1 week I would say would be normally fine, but do you think in this case we should do it 2 weeks?
Sure. I think in this case, we could do 2 weeks. So that would be Wednesday, September 11th would be when the record would close at about 4 p.m. Okay.
I think that would be appropriate.
Yes, then I think we would want a vote to close the oral portion of the hearing and leave the written record open until Wednesday, September 11th at 4 p.m.
Okay, is there a motion that someone could make, please?
I'll move to close the oral record and hold the written record open to Wednesday, September 11th.
And
You can second it.
I will second that motion. Any further discussion? Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So, all right. So we have 2 weeks until 4 p.m. on September 11th to submit written documentation, and you will reach the city of Bend and ask them. We would love a response one way or another.
Yes, Commissioners, I'll reach out to City of Bend growth management staff today. Wanted to just note for those who might be listening during the open record period, just a reminder that materials must be received by our server at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, the 11th. So just make sure you build in some extra time, especially if you're sending larger emails with attachments. For our email size, the county server can handle 5 megabytes in one email. So if you have larger materials, you might break those up into separate emails so we can receive them, and ensure that instead of links that you provide PDFs of web pages, if you're linking to materials, that we can include that in the record. Other than that, thank you very much, commissioners. And I'll work with with Brenda to establish a date for deliberations following that open record period.
Okay, great. Thank you. When will the 97 proposal come in front of us? Do you have a date on that?
That's a great question, Madam Chair. We're working with the applicant right now, but we've identified approximately the first week of October is what we're shooting for. We're just ensuring it works for the applicant to be there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, interesting. Great. All right, so now we are to other items. Okay, other items. Yesterday, I actually spent a couple hours with Deputy Blaylock. We went through Dirt World a bit, and then we actually went to a couple 100 acres out on the east side of Redmond. Driving, seeing what's happening. Actually, I have a whole series of pictures on my phone, which I'm sure my phone is going to turn into a video for me, like it did last time. And what was fascinating was way back on the 140 acres that we're trying to transfer with the state, someone had a garden with corn growing and all these plants, and they were all incredibly, they looked very watered. So it was like, get all the way back there and somebody's got a garden. So yeah, it was pretty amazing. I'm like, do they have a well? Is there a well back there? But somehow they're getting enough water on all their plants. And the really sad thing was I think I saw like 4 women that were either in Dirt World or out there. And it's just hoping that we can reach those people that want to be reached and make a difference in their life.
Yeah.
So any other updates?
So along those lines, it sounds like Redmond's asking for a commissioner to be kind of stepping up to be involved with kind of action items for the east side of Redmond in partnership with the county. So my understanding is kind of selecting one of us to be at the table.
Yes.
So I'm interested in, working through that process right now if we want to take a moment.
All right. I'm sure we all want to be that person, because how many years have we been talking about the Redmond property and what we can do? And we are so much closer today than we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So it's, the good news is Redmond is, they have excellent rules in their city. And in order to implement everything, it's going to need a lot of attention. So we can make a difference starting 25.
I would also be interested in serving in that capacity. If this is a working group that's being convened by the city, I think we could also leave it to the city to choose. If all 3 of us would like to do that.
Well, and I'll step away from that one. I have different vision for that 45 acres and, so I mean, I don't need to be in the middle of that one. One of you can do that. Just letting you know.
Thank you, Commissioner DeBonne.
And I'll just offer, Commissioners, if I may, that the city intends for the working group to meet every other week. And the first meeting is next Thursday, September 5th at 10:30 in the morning, approximately 10:30 to noon. They were initially scheduling for the meeting to be in the afternoon. They respected that we have a joint meeting with the City of Bend City Council that afternoon, so they moved it up in the morning. And I understand maybe there's a COAC meeting at noon or something.
Yeah, there's there's a meeting at noon that Mayor Fitch is at. So that's why it got moved up to 10:30.
So next week would be the kickoff meeting. So the discussion of and deciding the liaison is timely now. Thank you.
I'm available on Thursday at 10:30.
Yes, and so am I.
Okay.
So
mean, I also, one other way we could handle this would be to alternate. It's nice to have a consistent participant, but it's also, I think, it's pretty clear for everyone involved in anything in Redmond where the county has a role to play, that it's important to be in touch with multiple commissioners, because we often have distinct views on what will be the most effective and successful approaches to various issues.
But we did both vote on concept 2, which I think is excellent. So
Yep.
I'm happy with going every other time.
Okay.
That's
That'd be great.
that's kind of a win-win, don't you think? And we've got to get something done, and just riding around for a couple hours out there and seeing what has happened. It's time to get something done. We've got to get that land swap done. And right in the middle of the 140 acres. So I did make the comment that I was surprised there were not as many camps as I thought there would be. And then all of a sudden we get in the back and there are more. So some people have gone way to the back of the property. So, okay. Is there anything else we need to do today?
If did you say these will be weekly?
Yeah, bi-week.
Bi-weekly.
Mhm.
Okay. So the next one won't be Thursday the 12th. It'll be the week afterwards.
Yes. Is it okay if I do the one next week?
Are you still going to have a Crow meeting on the 19th?
Yes. So if you could do that meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with Edco till 10:30 in Redmond, so that would work well. If 10:30 is going to be the regular time.
It's a good question. I'm not sure if the city has decided what the regular time would be. They were initially planning for this meeting to be at 1:00, but recognizing the
Well,
joint meeting we
yeah.
have, they moved it earlier. So I'm not sure that the committee has decided what time.
What a question mark.
That'll be scheduled.
Yeah.
To be determined.
Yeah. So hopefully they won't pick during Edco on the 19th. And that's fine. You go to the next week's, and I'll
make the
try to
next one happen.
make sure the next one works.
Okay. Anything else?
I got a whole list of things here.
Okay, Bree, your turn.
Well, so met with Chuck Hemingway and Home More Network representative yesterday, and they're asking for 5 acres possibly just north of the city Juniper Ridge area. So this would be on resource land, which we went around last year and determined that we don't have the authority to cite. House Bill 2006 was put in place, and there's guidance from our staff and our legal and the governor's office saying that we don't have the authority to cite outside of a city on resource land. And in discussion also yesterday with Councilor Perkins from the city of Bend, there's an expectation that we're going to come to the table and do something like that. Just conversations. So, however formal or not formal. So we're going to be in that same spot where the city of Bend is going to look at us and say, well, why aren't you doing this? And we're going to be in the same spot as we were a year ago. Well, the House bill doesn't allow us to do this. We don't have the authority to do it legally. Are we, so then my question to the commissioners are, is there a path we want to start looking at, or is the answer just a hard no? We've got unsanctioned dispersed camping on city and county land. We have a code enforcement case on ourselves. And, we're just going to be in that moment where the city's looking at us like, well, why don't you do something about this? So as I said, we didn't need to talk about that. This is our opportunity to compare notes a little bit in a public meeting, but in preparation for what we're going to see at the joint meeting next week also.
Yes, the Friday, Thursday from 2 to 4.
Yeah.
And yes, the city thought it would be from our meeting yesterday, that it should be on the west side of the railroad tracks. And of course, that's our land there.
And we don't have the authority to do it.
I know we do have one legal counsel in here.
We can come back to this in a moment, but at the high level, this issue of that county land being EFU zoned is the reason, is in my mind, that we should really be focused in on enabling use of the Gales property under normal, everyday county local land use laws by facilitating and expediting that rezone process. And which we could do through an investment of, either a direct investment of our own or through an investment through the Coordinated Homeless Resource Office. That is the whole reason for that rezone effort, is to address the challenge of not being authorized to do things on resource zoned lands. So I'd like us to stop trying to say that land use constraints are an excuse not to do something and to throw up our hands and to want to fight with the state. And I'd like us to actually do what we can to make a willing and able property owner able to pursue a project that will provide great benefits to all of us in Deschutes County.
Okay. And I do believe the Gales are in the middle of pursuing things. I've been told that I have to not be part of it because then if it comes before us, I would have to recuse myself. So, but
I think we're all going to have to recuse ourselves.
yeah, it'll have to pass unanimously because we all had to recuse, right?
I've said pretty clearly, that I support that rezone process. So I mean, there are, and I asked county staff about, alternative pathways to land use approvals that don't go through the Board of Commissioners. And I believe that there's ways that could be done.
But I agree. I mean, there's ways for that to be done. We would just absolutely, in a public meeting, state that, we're leaning into this and we'd be compromised directly and publicly. So, I mean, there's nothing to apologize for there.
No, I mean,
I struggle with funding it though, so that's our state land use system. If government pays a private property owner to fund a request for rezoning, that's a mind bender that I have a hard time getting through.
Well, the stated purpose of the purpose that this piece of land will be used for is entirely a public benefit. It is not. This is not to enrich the Gales family. This is to enable a very generous and thoughtful and community-oriented property owner to help us. Well, I have no concerns about doing public-private partnerships to accomplish important public goals.
Well, so as I say, getting back to the beginning here, so we're not talking about the 5 acres, Juniper Ridge resource land. There's just no path for that. Is that an agreement that we go into with the city of Bend? And the feedback to the Coordinated Homeless Office too, right? I mean, this is us as an entity, and Commissioner Dare is at the table there, obviously. But if the message is, thank you, but we're not supportive of working outside the bounds of the rules and the laws of the state of Oregon, we don't have the opportunity to let ourselves even dream about this, because there's a fully baked proposal there, or 3/4 baked or whatever. It's a no-go to start. I mean, so I'm just saying, let's be clear what we say to the city council next week, because they're looking at us thinking, why don't you just go do this?
But the good news is this research actually can apply to Gales property.
Oh yeah,
too.
it's maturing the idea for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, and they've brought in some really outstanding people that have the capacities to make it all happen. Well,
Yeah, so it sounds like the answer is, yeah, we're sorry, but we can't there's no path for us
Yeah,
there,
we do have,
Juniper Ridge.
and we do have the available funding in the Coordinated Houseless Response Office to, and, you know, to help the Gales with this. And I would hope that that's something we can determine on the September 19th. That we could do.
Well,
And are we?
we're talking about two things here. I'm
will we
trying to get
be-
more
Yeah.
clear.
We will have other meetings between now and the joint meeting with the
Right.
City Council next week.
We'll have one
I
on
would
Wednesday.
I would appreciate staff input on this question of, you know, North Juniper Ridge in particular and what we can and can't do there.
I know, Kim, you as county legal would say, no, you can't do this. Even though we're talking about having them on wheels and it's all temporary and we just put them in there and this is where you go and it's like less than 5 acres. But because it's EFU, the state could, whatever, send us to prison.
Last year, we asked the governor's office.
Yeah.
And the answer was no.
Been the position of both county legal and community development. but
Okay,
Probably be present to provide a little bit more robust conversation next week.
okay, that would be great.
We'll schedule this for next Wednesday for a discussion and we can discuss this topic and just provide a summary of the other topics in preparation for the joint meeting the next day.
Yeah, as I say, and my goal is just to be real clear, because if we go in and shrug our shoulders and say maybe, they're gonna look at us like, okay, well, you're gonna do it then, right? So we've got to get real clear at this point in
Yes.
time.
Incredibly clear. Okay,
So then, another one, there's discussion about the Fort Thompson, possible development, but what about Lapine Campground process? So I was interested in making sure that we had this discussion with the Lapine City Council. We've got 2-acre parcels, 2 of them and a 3-acre parcel. And now we're gonna, not meet with Lapine for another 6 weeks or whatever it is,
2 months.
yeah, whenever it is. So generally, the idea was to possibly put an RFP out and see if people respond to it. So now should we wait or do we want to proceed? So this is just discussion amongst us also. Christie's been working on it, trying to get them a little bit more mature about what could be possible there. So then my thought is, do we proceed at this point in time or we just stand by until
Actually,
basically this winter is when we would get around to it then?
I'd actually emailed Jeff Wilschlager and he just called me back this morning. So I would really love to talk to Jeff. And if we can bring this back up next Wednesday, because I don't want to keep pushing it out forever, but I would like to talk to Jeff and see where he's at.
Yeah, okay. I went and talked to 4 out of the 5 counselors recently on this topic and, they're kind of split, but they want to know the facts about it. So it was going to be a real good opportunity to lay it out on the table at our joint meeting. And
Right.
now that joint meeting slipped, and that's why I bring it up now,
Which would. have
because
been
that'll
tonight.
that's
Yeah.
a direct, gap in time now before we were going to be able to talk to them.
Okay,
Yeah, I had some discussion with Mayor Richer about this and he seemed open to the idea, but he also suggested that the city would basically, because of the added traffic that we were creating, the city would basically want us to help fix the Burgess Road intersection with Highway 97, which is a really big.
Oh, like we're talking a $30 million project,
Yeah.
but sure, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in advancing the idea on Drafter Road, but if it's going to be if this is going to become a tail wag the dog situation and we suddenly put ourselves on the hook for massive transportation investments to enable a campground on Drafter Road, then I'm that's where my support would probably stop.
Well, we obviously need to get through that transportation impact. Do we do that officially? Ask the city, we'd like you to evaluate and give us a clear message on if we put an RFP, what the requirements are, or do we put an RFP out and knowing that we may trigger it because it could be a dead end because of that cost. So again, we could move forward a little bit by doing one or the other choice there.
Yeah, I think that would be fine to ask the city to give us a clearer sense of what their expectations are for what we are going to do in terms of transportation investments in order to be able to proceed with this.
And a transportation investment could be shared across other activities there also. So it
Sure. Yeah, I mean
it could trigger,
Yeah.
you know, a partnership in whatever could be done.
fixing the, you know, fixing those intersections, you know, by Gordy's, at Burgess. I mean, that's a whole lot of people are interested in that for a whole lot of reasons. But you know, I just don't want this campground proposal to suddenly kind of push us to the front and, you know, give us a much larger burden and responsibility than is appropriate for the county in solving those transportation issues.
Okay.
So we all attended the Build Blitz Heart of Oregon Corps event after last week's meeting. So it was just a great opportunity to see those structures, the frame structures in place. They'll be put out on the site at Oasis Village here pretty soon. So it was very exciting to see all the partnerships and the pride in the you know, next generation of builders that are learning about how to tip up a structure. On another topic, Vector Control District, Four Rivers Vector Control District, Southern Deschutes County. I met with their board, or they had a board meeting which I attended the other day, and so we're going to schedule that meeting. Remember, we're required to have an annual meeting because it is a Vector Control District, and we'll get that on the schedule here pretty soon and have them come in. One of the things that was discussed about the clarity on the budget and the choices the board is making, and I pointed out the fact that, well, remember, and they've always had 3 people appointed to their board, but now they got to a point where they put all 5 appointments on the board. It's just they hadn't put 5 on before, but there can be 5 public members in the budget committee. So I offered to even, you know, be a budget member on the Vector Control District board. This is Four Rivers Vector Control, and so other members of the community can be involved with that budget committee also. So they'll probably present that idea in front of us, and then we'll look for that opportunity. So then they can have just a real robust public process. 2 other items here. I was able to do a septic inspection ride along last Thursday with Lapine Septic Service. Frank is their inspector, and what a great opportunity. We opened up about 6 Orenco ATT systems, learned all about how they test the oxygen, the pH, and the clarity in there, looking for the condition of the curtains, the recirculation, learning about the pumps and how systems in Southern Deschutes County and Deschutes County have a 20% recirculation back in the main tank, which isn't done all over the state, and just a lot of great knowledge about what it looks like inside of those alternative treatment technology Orenco systems. Another whole path that popped right up was the fact that there's some systems being removed in the city of Lapine because they're going on sewer, and there was a lot of community pressure by some of these installers to reuse. Let's reuse these systems. You know, it's just a box in the ground with pumps, the curtains, to sprayer, and if the box holds water, that's what it needs to do. If it's not leaking, you know, it could be reusable, but state law says that they can't be reused because they have to come, when they go in the ground, they have to come with a 2-year manufacturer's warranty. And that's a hard stop for reutilizing a system, which from my point of view, understanding these systems, it's a shame that state law was put in place like that. As I say, that was the beginning of the program. So my point is here, this could be a real good opportunity for a legislative ask. You know, let's put a path out for reuse. You know, if the box isn't cracked, if it's not leaking, it's fully usable, you know, in a reconditioned fashion.
Don't they have like a 30-year life? And if it's only been used for 5 years, that seems
Well, that's
really-
exactly the,
Yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts people because people know that these systems new are, you know, $10,000 just for the box plus the installation and maintenance requirements, and reusing them sure would be valuable.
Might be really smart. Let's see what we can do.
And I think it's a legislative, you know, DEQ's official messages.
No.
It's in ORSs.
There was a huge push on right to repair legislation. in the last couple of years. This seems like it would go right along in line with that. You know, oftentimes prohibitions on reuse of things were advocated for originally by manufacturers
Yeah.
who want to keep selling new stuff. So, you know, if you want to pursue, if you want to seek a legislator to carry a bill like that, I mean, I would very much support Deschutes County being, you know, a chief advocate behind that.
As I said, they already ran it to ground. It's just like one line in the ORSs that says to your manufacturer's warranty required. So now then, you know, the Renko is like, well, it's 5 years old. Why would I do that? You know, so it makes sense. And it's not a big change.
We're just setting up some kind of process for, you know, re-inspection.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
Well, as I say, and it's you learn about it. If it holds water, everything inside's maintainable. So it's just not even that complicated.
I mean, maybe, you know, maybe some of the local businesses could be, you know, basically authorized to re-warranty something.
Well, and it's as simple as it's under annual maintenance. So it's a restart authorization. Yes, the systems have been installed correctly and it functions correctly, and an annual inspection. So as I say, it looks like it's a real simple little one-liner in the state laws.
So who's the legislator is going to carry it?
Warner Reschke.
Well, as I say, I'm mentioning it today here for the first time. We can bring it to our lobbyist, Doug, and then, yeah, look for whoever wants to do it.
Anything else?
One more item. So Saturday, Commissioner Chang and I were both at the Deschutes River Recreation Home Sites Unit 9 annual meeting. So we were just invited. So we spoke a little bit. They're really interested. It was interesting, and not based in reality in some of it, but we want fire hydrants in our neighborhood. It's like, well, okay, well, that's a water system. You probably wouldn't just put fire hydrants in. And then some people are asking about sewers. You know, why wouldn't we do that? So it was just interesting, hopefully getting people grounded in what it means to be a independent rural neighborhood association, because they also brought up the concept of why did we authorize large storage structures on some parcels that don't get the authorization for sewer, and it's in their CC&Rs, and it's just not an enforceable item from Deschutes County. So as I say, it was just getting people up to speed about who's responsible for what. But it was a good day out there next to the river.
And there was a lot of discussions about what's the county's job and what's the community's job.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know, what's a special road district's job, what's the county's job, what's, yeah, you know, how would you form a water or sewer district, all kinds of things like that. Yeah, a couple things I would share. Last week, I went to the final day of Boys and Girls Clubs, you know, summer childcare early learning program, and got to just see the 140 kids who participated in that this year, who the care of whom enables many, you know, hundreds of families to go to work every day. So it was great to see that and to hear about, you know, again, the constraints that we're all too familiar with of running childcare in an environment where you're basically caught in between. You know, to have an economically viable operation, you're really stuck between, you know, wanting to charge parents too much or more than they can afford, or wanting to underpay your employees. I mean, it's a really difficult situation. It's great that we have organizations that are doing private philanthropic fundraising to kind of close that gap and make it possible to offer childcare in our community. I also went to the DRRH number 9 meeting. On Friday evening, I went to, I believe we were all invited to the Giving Plates, you know, annual thanks event for major donors. They wanted to recognize us for being one of the earliest contributors to their capital campaign for the expansions that they've done over the last few years, the American Rescue Plan investments, and gave recognition and thanks to the full Board of Commissioners. I was the one who was there, so they sent me home with the plaque, but the plaque is for us.
Oh, great. Now Renee is always so wonderful at thanking the county. So many times I think people in our community forget how much the county does. And, saw her on the news this morning. Her donations are down 7% and yet the need is up 20%. It's like 5,000 people now. So yeah, their new store is really quite lovely. Anyway, thank you, Renee, for recognizing all that we try to do.
They did.
That's nice.
They did a couple of really great video pieces in preparation for this thanks event, and I believe they are available to view online at this point if anyone's interested.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we all three of us attended the AOC wildfire hazard map discussion on Monday virtually. Yeah, I was disappointed by the lack of understanding among many commissioners of what this mapping effort is supposed to be doing and what the state will be using the maps for. I was also disappointed that there are a number of commissioners who didn't even want to talk about the map, but wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about other concerns that they have, like the habitat conservation plan that'll affect state managed land, not the wildfire hazard map that'll affect privately owned residential lands. But yeah, we just, so everyone knows, we were all there, and we'll see where that process goes from here.
Yes. And yes, I was on that. And see, do we still refer to him as Judge Crawford, or is he now Commissioner Crawford? He was really, he was very, let's see, thinking that our beautiful Black Butte Ranch and our Sun River are all underrated their fire potential. And anyway, so I was so glad that I was there listening. So Judge Crawford, we'll be chatting. So the meeting, we do not have a meeting on Monday. It is a holiday. And we will be meeting next Wednesday at 9 a.m. So
Just to we do not have a meeting on Monday, correct?
no, it's a holiday.
I understand. I thought you said we do, so I just want.
No, we do not have it. Okay, fabulous. All right. Anything, no executive today? We're good? Okay. Have a great weekend. Don't start any fires.
There you go.
Do not start any fires. Thank you, Steve.